In her previous life, she had been entangled with a scumbag for half a life before meeting her true love. Before dying, she made a wish to meet Lu Chen in her next life as soon as possible, as she was the only suffering man in her heart. As a result, my eyes closed and I was reborn back to the day of my scumbag's divorce, and I also activated the spatial system. In this life, she will let scumbags and lowly women return all they owe her, and then go to the countryside to pursue her husband, doting on this man to heaven. Keywords of the novel. Rebirth 80. Miss Jiao explodes the Rural Rouge without pop-ups, Rebirth 80. Miss Jiao explodes the Rural Rouge complete collection download, Rebirth 80. Miss Jiao explodes the Rural Rouge latest chapter reading. Chapter 1. Rebirth. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. Rebirth. On the highway, the oil tanker lost control and crashed into a black sedan. The sound of the explosion was deafening, and the white light pricked people's eyes. Chu Nian tightly hugged the urn in her arms, and before losing consciousness, a relieved smile appeared on the corner of her lips. She has never known anyone in her life, and has gone through many detours. Her only luck is to meet Lu Chen and spend 10 years together with him. The only regret is that they met too late and their time together was too short. If there is a next life, I hope they can get to know each other early and stay together. What kind of hypocrite Shen Weijun is pretending to be? Come back with a child for free. We are still a child, how can we be their stepmother? Keep your voice down. My daughter cried all night and finally fell asleep. You woke her up again. The deliberately suppressed sound of arguments came from downstairs. At first, Nian struggled to open his eyes, and when he saw the surrounding scenery clearly, his eyes widened in surprise. Redwood vertical mirror wardrobe, iron bed, old-fashioned big but desk lamp on the calendar on the opposite wall, there are several big characters written in 1973. She rubbed her sore and swollen eyes, facing the young and green face in the vertical mirror, feeling ecstatic. She was reborn. The argument outside is still ongoing. Let's slow down the marriage first. I don't want to be spoiled and wronged. I'm just her daughter. If Jiao had something, I wouldn't have lived either. Listening to the familiar voice of my parents, I felt a bitter nose at first thought. She remembered that she was reborn on the eve of marrying Shen Weijun. Shen Weijun surprisingly brought a child who still couldn't walk, claiming that it was left by a colleague. Marriage is possible, but the first thought is to accept this child. My first mother exploded in one go and had a child before getting married. The Shen family is so poor that they jingle. A family of 6 are squeezed into a tube-shaped building of less than 50 square meters. They have another child. Her daughter is not married, and jumping into a fire pit is more like that. My first father, however, felt it was only natural to take care of his friends and children. It was morally unacceptable for my daughter to regret her marriage. Firstly, it was easy for her to lose her reputation, and secondly, it was already this time. Why bother looking for a good young man with all 4 corners? I can't really let 10 fingers go down and suffer without touching the pearl of the sun and spring water in my palm. At first, Nian pushed the door open and her apricot eyes cried like rotten peaches. Mom and Dad, don't argue, I won't get married. As soon as the words fell, a knock on the door sounded. My first father opened the door, and Shen Weijun came in with a nanny, followed by Ruan Shanshan. Chu Nian glanced lightly at the two of them, with a cold smile on her lips. Like in his past life, a family of 3 came to eat out of nowhere. Ruan Shanshan saw Chu Nian swollen and red eyes crying, and angrily twisted Shen Weijun, then affectionately took her arm. I have already taught him a lesson for you, and he knows he was wrong. He dare not bring his child to his door and ask me to be a lobbyist. Chu Nian withdrew her arm without any trace and looked at Ruan Shanshan with a smile on her face. In her past life, she was deeply moved by these words and regarded Ruan Shanshan, a junior high school classmate, as her best friend, sharing everything with her. Little did they know that they were being fooled by their fiancé and best friend teaming up. What noble and virtuous, intimate best friend. That child is simply their illegitimate child. The two of them had already colluded with her behind her back and even planted a child for her to raise. It's ridiculous that she treated the third child as her own and ended up with a ruined family. God has eyes, she must make them pay the price for a new life. In what capacity are you acting as a lobbyist? Shouldn't his parents personally come to do this? Chu Nian recited a few words with a gun and a stick, which made Ruan Shanshan's face turn red. Shen Weijun immediately stood in front of her, glaring at Chu Nian and scolding, "You speak politely. Shanshan is also doing it for your own good. If there's anything coming at me, don't vent your anger on Shanshan people. I advise you to recognize this child quickly, otherwise you'll just wait to go to the countryside." Chu Nian was hugged by his haughty remarks with a cold smile on his shoulder, his gaze no longer the gentle little sheep it used to be. "What if I don't recognize it? Who knows where you brought the wild child from? I find it dirty." Shen Weijun choked on her for a moment, lowered his eyes with a guilty expression, and became angry with embarrassment. "Keep your mouth clean." My first father's face darkened, and my first mother's expression was terrifying. Just as they were about to speak, they were stopped by their daughter. Chu Nian pointed at the child in Shen Weijun's arms and questioned, "We are not relatives or relatives, so why don't you hold the child to your door?" Shen Weijun said confidently, "How could it be that he is not a relative? It is your honor to marry me and raise him." Oh, moral kidnapping, or the same old rhetoric from a past life. This honor is given to dogs, even dogs find it unlucky. Glory. A rhetorical question, Shen Weijun hesitated, after all, he felt guilty in his heart. Ruan Shanshan saw that the situation was not good and continued, "The father of this child is a colleague of Shen Weijun. He saved someone and disappeared." Chu Nian repeated her words and walked over to the phone in time. Shen Weijun strode over and stopped her hand pressing the button. "What are you doing?" At first, she felt disgusted to let go. She even felt disgusted to have more contact with scumbags. "Call your unit and ask for clarification." Chu Nian was fully prepared to watch Shen Weijun. In his past life, she believed everything he said without even seeking evidence, so she agreed to get married under Shen Weijun's soft and hard measures, using a dowry to subsidize their entire family and support this child. No fighting. Shen Weijun stepped on a cat's tail and stood in front of the phone with a red and white face. "Just to verify, what are you afraid of?" At first, Nian repeatedly interrogated Shen Weijun word by word. At this moment, the first father also noticed the clues, and the first mother directly asked, "Xiao Shen, to be honest, what is going on with this child?" End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Breakup. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. Breakup. Shen Weijun dared not confront his first parents and only dared to curse them. "What are you suspicious of? It's not generous at all. I said the child belongs to a former colleague. If you call the team to verify, it's just hitting my face. We, the Shen family, should not be ignorant. Law. Chu Nian was updated by his shameless remarks. In her past life, she was caught up in this kind of PUA method, constantly taking money from her mother's family to support her husband's family. Don't treat them as big haters. Shen Weijun was right on her love brain, but her parents couldn't bear to let her go to the countryside. At this moment, he brought his illegitimate son over and forced them to recognize him. There's no such good thing in this life. Chu Nian gave a disgusted glance at the wet nurse with a runny nose. "I just don't understand the big picture, and I don't deserve your dignified Shen family, so let's get married." As the words fell, Shen Weijun froze and looked at Chu Nian incredulously. Ruan Shanshan was also shocked and her eyes widened. Chu Nian has been pursuing Shen Weijun since her first year of high school. When Shen Weijun went to the countryside, she almost cried to tears and wrote a letter to send every day. Although Shen Weijun never replied, she remained unmoved. What's going on today, breaking up with Shen Weijun just for the sake of being a child? Shen Weijun was used to being praised by her and couldn't accept the gap for a moment. He hesitated and said, "Just divide it, don't regret it. You are delicate and capricious. You don't know how to cook or do laundry. Who else would want you besides me? Let's split up, you just wait to go to the countryside. Who knows if you can still come back when you go." This sentence will restrain the first parents. The first mother tugged at her daughter's sleeve and lowered her voice to discuss. "Jiao, getting married is a big deal. Let's call our team first and make a decision once we have a clear understanding." My first father nodded along. Once on the list, getting married won't work anymore. Chu Nian shook his head and made a firm decision. "You bring back the marriage certificate, and my family will return the 20 yuan dowry to you. From now on, let's split it up." After speaking, she pushed Shen Weijun and Wan Shanshan out of the door and locked the door with a loud bang in front of them. Wan Shanshan held the child in her arms, feeling completely disoriented. Shen Weijun's face turned pale, and he couldn't believe that Chu Nian had really kicked him out. In the past, when he came to Chu's house, Chu Nian always tried to fill him with the chocolate of high-grade dim sum he had saved. "I didn't say anything this time, and surprisingly, I still want to get married. What exactly is this woman's wrong tendon?" Chu Nian watched the two of them leave through the second-floor window, raised her lips and smiled. Couldn't she bear it anymore? The good show is still ahead. My parents stood behind her, looking at her with worry. "Daughter, if you are sad, you will cry. We don't need him very much. Mom will find you a good one." The first mother held her daughter and comforted her gently. My first father took a puff of smoke and sighed, "We'll be compiling the list in a few days. A good young man has been picked out long ago. Where are you going to find someone who suits your daughter?" Looking at my parents, Chu Nian felt warm in her heart and plunged into her mother's arms. "That's great, they are still alive and well in this lifetime." In her past life, she married Shen Weijun haphazardly. Her mother was afraid that she would suffer in the Shen family, and the dowry almost emptied the house. The Shen family had a good grasp of her, and the whole family stared at her dowry. In the end, the dowry was empty, and the second elder of the Shen family forced her to go home and get money. However, at that time, her first father was reported for hastily getting married and avoiding going to the countryside. Her salary plummeted and she was often bullied. The mother was also depressed, angry with breast cancer, and left early. Unable to retrieve the money, the two elders of the Shen family immediately changed their faces and treated her as a servant, beating and scolding her whenever they felt uncomfortable. She endured for Shen Weijun and finally hoped for him to be transferred back. She thought he could feel sorry for her, but to her surprise, he had been colluding with Wan Shanshan for a long time. She only realized that she was a complete idiot when she got divorced. Marrying the wrong person is not just about reporting the wrong favor. The reason why Chu Nian fell in love with Shen Weijun wholeheartedly was because the equipment room caught fire, and Shen Weijun rushed into the fire scene to save her despite the danger. Afterwards, she confirmed with Shen Weijun that this scumbag had recognized him all at once. It wasn't until she reunited with Lu Chen after her divorce that she realized that the person who saved her back then was someone else, the young master of the Lu family, the proud son of heaven. Unfortunately, not long after Lu Chen saved her, the Lu family was sent down. They just missed out on it so hard for so many years. Thinking of Lu Chen, Chu Nian's eyes turned red. My first mother was so heartbroken that she didn't know what to do. She took out 3 big Unity cards from her pocket and asked her daughter to go out and buy clothes. At first thought, tears burst into laughter. For a lifetime, her mother is still the same, only able to use money to coax her. She grabbed the money and kissed her mother, went into her own room, changed into pajamas, and went to the department store, but not to buy a prog, but to buy supplies for educated youth going to the countryside. She plans to go to the mountainous area to find Lu Chen and spend the darkest days of her life with him. The Lu family was demoted to the mountainous area, and their houses, cars, and assets were confiscated. Lu's father couldn't bear it and ended his life with a belt. The remaining mother, Lu Chen, and her two younger sisters struggled to make a living. The Lu family was once a wealthy family, each enjoying their own privileges and not knowing how to do farm work. Lu Chen was forced to pick up a sickle while playing the violin. A family of 4 had their food on him, and the young man who had just turned 18 quickly grew into a man. After they were together, she painfully caressed the scars on his fingers countless times, thinking that if only she could accompany him to the countryside back then. Lu Chen always smiled and nodded at her nose, doting on her and saying, "I can't bear to have you suffer with me." She wished she could fly to Lu Chen's side immediately after a lifetime of hard work. "Without this handle, my dad can still retire in his current position, and my mom won't die of anger." But Lu Chen is right. She hasn't even washed her own handkerchief at home, so if she's not fully prepared, not to mention helping, she might even drag on Lu Chen. Chu Nian Nian found her piggy bank from the drawer, opened the base, and with a loud splash, poured all the money inside onto the bed. "I have roughly counted it, not much, just exactly 300 yuan. She needs to buy some rice, noodles, grains, fabric, and medicine, and leave an additional 100 yuan on her body for emergency use." When the parents of the first family saw their daughter humming a tune and going out, they finally let go of their lingering heart. "It seems that my daughter really doesn't want the Shen family kid anymore. Okay, I just don't like it. It's like eating a soft and hard meal like a stuffed bun." After complaining about this, the first mother began to sit by the phone to contact the old sisters and find a new partner for her daughter. The first father let out a sigh as his wife tossed and turned, sitting silently on the side, feeling the son of a certain family who was just of age. Little did they know that Chu Nian Nian had already filled out the registration form for going to the countryside behind their backs. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Don't want to live anymore. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. Don't want to live anymore, Auntie, I came late. What are the remaining rural areas I can go to now? She remembers that Lu Chen went to the toughest resettlement site, which seemed to be called Qingshan Village. There shouldn't be anyone competing with her for it, right? Thinking of meeting Lu Chen soon, Chu Nian Nian looked at her aunt with great anticipation, but to her surprise, she didn't even pay attention to her. She frowned and called out again, and then Aunt looked up and down. "Auntie, what registration points are left now?" Auntie threw over a registration form and said with a strange expression, "Who is your aunt? Don't get too close. Don't think that if you dress well, you can make a special appearance like a delicate young lady. That's all you have left. You can go to Heihe village. This girl looks delicate and tender, and the conditions in the remaining areas of Heishui village are relatively good. If she dares to be a demon without knowing her feet, see if she doesn't slap her with the soles of her shoes." Chu Nian Nian looked at the remaining registration points, pointed to one of them, and smiled sweetly, saying, "Auntie, I don't want to go to Heihe village." Auntie was about to go berserk after hearing the first half of the sentence, but when she first recited it, she said the second half. "Would it be in Qingshan village instead?" Auntie brushed her reading glasses and looked at Chu Nian Nian in surprise, feeling angry. "If you know where Qingshan village is, you can change it." Looking at Aunt's expression, Chu Nian Nian knew she had guessed right. Lu Chen went to Qingshan village, which was the hardest place to go to the countryside. "Of course I know, Qingshan village is the hardest place," replied with a smile, but she is not afraid. As long as she can be with Lu Chen, she will not be afraid of any hardship. "Do you know?" Auntie stood up from her seat and carefully examined Chu Nian Nian. Do you still go after knowing the hardships? Chu Nian Nian's righteous words. How can you be picky about fat and thin? Of course, you have to go to the hardest and poorest places to shine and heat up. Auntie's eyes were moist, and she changed her previous posture and excitedly grasped Chu Nian's hand. I have realized that I had a bad attitude before, please forgive me. She looked at the registration points from the beginning of the call, with waves of people coming every day, making a fool of herself in order to go to better places. I didn't expect such a delicate girl dressed up to have such a high level of enlightenment. Qingshan village is located in the south, not unlike Beijing. It's hot and humid, and there are even more mosquitoes in the summer. Girl, you must take your things with you before setting off. Chu Nian Nian nodded with a smile and then went to Friendship Department Store. On the counter, there was pure white rice and delicate flour. She took out a big unity sheet and bought 10 pounds first. She couldn't carry too much, so she had to move it little by little to her home, bring some urgent items, and send the rest to her parents by mail. Mosquito repellent, safflower oil, paracetamol, brown sugar, white rabbit. After a few trips, Chu Nian Nian's arms were full and he carried the linen bag given by the salesperson back home step by step. This is just a little more. I'm afraid my physical strength will hold me back as I'm about to go to the countryside. Chu Nian was muttering to himself, fiddling with a burlap bag as he was about to enter the yard when he heard the familiar noise inside. She quietly glanced inside and quickly dragged the things to the storage room to avoid being followed by the two old misers. Shen Weijun's parents have arrived, and Shen Weijun is also there, holding the child in his arms and constantly pestering. Taking advantage is not enough, then don't blame her for advancing the plan. Chu Nian Nian wiped away her sweat and walked into the reporting point with a sneer. Messing with men and women is enough for the old Shen family to drink a pot. After reporting the situation to the relevant personnel, Chu Nian Nian wandered home but was grabbed by Shen Weijun's mother as soon as she entered the door. Nian Nian, my family has given me all the dowry. You can't refuse to get married. You have such a good relationship with Xiao Jun, you must not break up. This child is just being raised by others and has no blood relationship with Xiao Jun. Even if you marry him, he won't be considered a stepmother. Don't be so narrow-minded. Chu Nian Nian shook off her body and took 2 steps back in disgust, afraid that spitting stars would splash on her. She glanced at Shen Weijun with a smile on her face. Is that so? Is there really no blood relationship? Shen Weijun gave her a cold glance. Have you had enough trouble? Who is as ignorant as you are? After finishing speaking, he weighed the doll in his arms and said, this is a glorious event. Taking care of it for you is to save face. Chu Nian Nian sneered, whoever wants this face, I don't want it anyway. She took out a handful of red tickets from her pocket and picked up 2 big unity tickets to throw to Shen Weijun. Here, I will return your dowry intact. 20 yuan is not enough for her to buy cloth, so it's worth talking about. Shen Weijun's mother stared straight at Chu Nian Nian's large bundle of bills, with all her heart set on coaxing the golden doll into her hands. As long as she enters his house, she has a way to clean up this inexperienced daughter.in.law. Shen Weijun held the child in his arms and couldn't make a move, watching 2 banknotes drift and fall to the ground. Not very harmful, extremely insulting. Shen Weijun's face turned pale and he said, Chu Nian Nian, pick up the money for me. Oh, if you want to eat soft rice but don't want to bend over, there's nothing so good. Anyway, I gave you the money. Do you want it or not? Chu Nian Nian rolled her eyes and Shi Shiran sat on her own leather sofa, giving the Shen family a glance that was not uncommon. The first father didn't expect his daughter to do so well, and his face felt a bit embarrassed. No matter how bad Shen Weijun is, his parents are always elders and should not give face to the elderly. My first mother only felt relieved, and the more she looked, the more she felt that Shen Weijun and the child in her arms had similar eyebrows and eyes, and their relationship was not innocent. She just wanted to quickly drive the person out. We have also refunded the dowry and returned the marriage certificate. From now on, my daughter has nothing to do with your old Shen family. Shen Weijuan's mother refused and picked up the money on the ground, putting it in her pocket. She stubbornly refused to leave. Don't worry, my in-laws. I really like to miss her. If she's not my daughter.in.law, I don't want to live anymore. Saying this, he sat down on the ground, patting his thighs and crying. Chu Nian watched the musician sneer and said, well, this time I completely stopped pretending. The Chu family is a respectable person, and I have never seen such a posture before. I can't even mess with my Chu mother. What are you doing? Get up quickly. Let others see what you look like. Men and women have their own way of getting married. Well, you still want to buy and sell forcefully. Chu Fu's eyebrows furrowed tightly. It seems that his daughter is absolutely not allowed to marry in this family. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Go to the hardest place. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. Go to the hardest place. Shen Weijuan's mother became even more crying when she saw that her first family was at a loss. Oh, my in-law's mother, I know my family's conditions are not as good as yours, but you can't despise poverty and love wealth. When it's time to get married, go back on your word. I don't want you to bully people like this. It's unreasonable. My first mother was so angry that she stroked her chest. My first father wanted to drag the person away, but due to the incompatibility between men and women, she couldn't take action and could only let the wife throw tantrums at home. Chu Nian remained calm and composed, pulling his parents onto the sofa and watching the show with his chin. Don't worry, let them make a fuss. The bigger the commotion now, the harder it will fall later. What's wrong with that? They're so tarnishing your reputation. My first mother quickly looked out the window with a blush, and there were indeed a few good people gathered in the yard, looking over here. Chu Nian never stops, opens the door of his small courtyard, and beckons his neighbors to walk inside. Shen Weijuan's mother became more energetic when she saw people, so she grabbed an old lady to judge. My family Shen Weijun saw that their child was pitiful and took him home to raise him, but the girl from the Chu family refused to do anything and insisted on repentance. You said there's no such selfishness. Shen Weijuan's father also began to speak, pulling at the little child and singing with a black face. We raised this child's father only after an accident. He was originally kind-hearted, but I couldn't tolerate him when I thought about him. I don't plan to take such a daughter.in.law anymore. Neighbors around are pointing at Chu Nian. If the needle doesn't pierce my body, I don't know it hurts. Everyone stands on the high ground and blames the beginners. Chu Nian watched them perform coldly, prompting them to name their children's parents. Oh, may I ask what his parents' names are? As long as you make it clear, I don't want the dowry to be applied to your house instead. As the words fell, Shen Weijuan's mother immediately got up from the ground, grabbed her son and gave him a big grin. Quickly, tell your wife who the parents of this child are. Shen Weijun choked for a moment and stuttered out a name. Chu Nian nodded and said, okay, I've taken note. As soon as the words fell, a few people in hats came in and presented their identification documents. Someone here has a bad influence. Shen Weijuan's momentum decreased by 3 points, and he presented his identification documents as instructed. Comrade, please answer truthfully. Who exactly is the child in your arms? A man's face was cold and stern, his gaze serious as he looked at Shen Weijun. Shen Weijun suddenly fell silent, beads of sweat as big as beans falling down his cheeks. Chu Nian spoke up at the right time and repeated the name he had just mentioned. The man took notes on paper and asked his first father, then picked up the phone on the coffee table and dialed it. After 2 beeps, the phone answered. Shen Weijuan's face turned pale, almost unable to stand, and his hands holding the child were not as stable as before. Only then did everyone realize that something was wrong. Ah, look at that child's eyebrows and eyes, don't they look a bit like Xiaoshen? No, my face shape is also similar. A few aunties squeezed their eyes and whispered, while Shen Weijuan's mother rushed over in anger and separated them. Don't be fooled, old lady. We're just raising someone else. If you dare to talk nonsense, I'll ruin your mouth. The first neighbors were all together, with a straight temper, and pushed Shen Weijuan's mother to the ground. Even you dare to play big garlic in front of us. It's said that the daughter of the original family refuses to marry into your family, and it's possible that she's your son's illegitimate child. A group of people were arguing happily, and the man gave them a sideways glance. Quiet. A few people immediately shut up, not even daring to speak out. Shen Weijun supported the sofa, even feeling a bit unstable. With a few beeps, the old-fashioned phone missed a sound, and everyone held their breath and listened clearly. Gu Hongwei. He's not married yet, where do he have a wife or children? The old-style phone had a loud voiceover, so everyone rubbed their ears and moved the microphone away. Everyone took a deep breath and looked at Shen Weijun with disdainful eyes. Shen Weijuan's legs were limp, and if it weren't for the quick hands of his aunt on the side, the child would have been hanging and falling to the ground with him. The man with a hat had a cold look in his eyes. Grab him. Shen Weijuan's mother was dumbfounded. After realizing it, she stopped a few people and knelt down, crying loudly. Comrades, you must have made a mistake. My son won't deceive anyone. Well, this is helping others raise him. Chu Nian looked amused, but I still haven't figured out whether the two elders of the Shen family know that it's their own little golden grandson. Please don't interfere with us. Now we reasonably suspect that this child was stolen by Shen Weijun. Shen Weijuan's mother was speechless and intimidated. Abducting and trafficking children will result in being shot. She's just such a son. The old Shen family only has this unique seedling. She shook Shen Weijun and kept pounding. Tell me quickly, what's going on? Where exactly did this child come from? Shen Weijun gritted his teeth and lowered his head, refusing to speak. Chu Nian looked coldly at them making a scene, with a mixture of snot and tears, feeling only pleasure in his heart. Suddenly, Shen Weijun suddenly looked up and glared fiercely at Chu Nian, pointing at her nose in hysteria. It's all her fault. I had to force myself to marry her. That's why I had to separate from my beloved. This is my child, the child I was forced to not recognize. Words shatter the heavens. The neighbors all looked at Chu Nian. Although no one wants their children to go out and endure hardship, thinking about it in their hearts is still different from taking action. Especially the first father, many people were staring at his position, wishing to grab his little braid and squeeze people out. At first, Nian sneered coldly. The dog man is really a dog, and even when he wants to die, he doesn't forget to pull her as a cushion. Slowly and logically, he took out the application form for educated youth to go to the countryside from his pocket and showed it to a few comrades. I registered late in order to go to the most difficult and knowledgeable places. A few people looked at the three big characters of Qingshan village and couldn't help but respect the delicate little girl in front of them. The old men in that place may not be able to endure, let alone the girls. I didn't expect to have this kind of enlightenment at a young age. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Initial display. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5 Initial display. My first mother saw clearly what was written above, and a black cloud hung in front of her. With my first father's support, she barely stood still. Why did you suddenly change your mind and have to go to the toughest place? Neighbors were unaware of the truth and extended their thumbs in praise. Several people bowed to Chu's parents and Chu Nian before looking at Shen Weijun. You're cheating yourself and trying to slander the little girl. Come with us. After speaking, he pushed away Shen Weijuan's parents who were trying to protect his son. Shen Weijuan's parents were limp and paralyzed in place, afraid to move. Chu Nian was relieved to see it, but it wasn't enough. He walked up to Shen Weijun and questioned, "You said this child belongs to you, but who is his mother? You're really disgusting for messing around." The initial recitation of a sentence ignited everyone's gossip. Finally found the key point. Since all the children are here, who is the woman? Everyone is full of gossip, and if others don't want to make another trip, why not let him explain the woman and bring her back for review together? Shen Weijun's face turned red and he pursed his lips, refusing to speak. At first, Nian had sharp eyes and saw Ruan Shanshan running outside the courtyard. She must have been worried about hearing the wind and came to see the child. Chu Nian pulled the person over and pretended to be aggrieved, wiping away tears. "Just now, you came to my house as a lobbyist and advised me to accept this child. We were both deceived by him. How could I have such a disgusting fiancé, not to mention promiscuity with people, and want to plant my child for me to raise?" Ruan Shanshan's face turned pale and she forced a smile. As her best friend, she wanted to comfort Chu Nian, but she opened her mouth but couldn't say anything. Chu Nian tightly grabbed Ruan Shanshan's arm, not allowing her to leave. Suddenly, she remembered something and took a cold breath. Children are all the flesh of a mother's heart. How could the woman refuse to let you take the child away? You wouldn't be forcing them, would you? The language shattered the sky, and several people's faces turned even darker. Shen Weijun's face turned pale with fear, unable to hold it back anymore, and he bit out the name of Ruan Shanshan. "Don't spit blood out." Ruan Shanshan was on the verge of collapse, vehemently denying it. Shen Weijun became angry and pointed at her nose, "That's not what you said to me. You have a small red mole on your left chest and a triangular scar on your right thigh. Now that it's not related to me, dare you take it off for everyone to test." Ruan Shanshan's face became increasingly pale. Just as she was about to refute, she received a heavy blow on her face. Shen's mother cursed loudly, "It must be this little slut who seduced my son. You catch her, don't catch my son. A farce, all taken away. Punishing multiple crimes together, it's estimated that we won't be able to get out in a few years." The neighbors dispersed, and the first father comforted the crying mother who couldn't bear to let her daughter go to the countryside. At first, Nian quietly took the supplies and sneaked back to her room to tidy up and salute. "Snow cream, tooth powder, soap, these are all things that my mother-in-law and two sisters are used to, so I need to bring them with me. Mosquito repellent, brown sugar, lactose, medicine bag, also need to be carried." The huge suitcase was packed tightly and couldn't be closed at all. Whether in this life or in the previous life, Chu Nian is not good at organizing these things. She sat on the bed in a fit of anger. If only Lu Chen were there, he would be the best at packing and bowing. They used to travel together before, and he always arranged everything in an orderly manner. She had everything she wanted to use. Just as I was thinking about it, there was a sudden heat in my neck. Chu Nian took out a pendant. It's the auction antique that Lu Chen gave her. She not only reborn, but also brought their love token. Holding the lotus pendant, a white light flashed before my eyes. Chu Nian instantly moved to another space, where she looked in surprise at the familiar scenery in the courtyard. This was the estate where she and Lu Chen lived after marriage. Reaching out to press the fingerprint lock, the villa door opened with a click. The freshly brewed coffee on the tea table emits white smoke, and the fruit tray is filled with apples and strawberries just picked from the manor. Everything is the same as in the previous life. What's going on? Did she travel again? No, she hasn't gone to the countryside yet and hasn't seen Lu Chen as a teenager. As soon as the thought moved, the scene before me changed again, and the first thought returned to my small bedroom in the 1970s. Her eyes lit up. Was this the built that I end space independent? Picking up the bundle of grain, Chu Nian silently recited in his heart, and then he opened his eyes and returned to the manor as expected. A burst of ecstasy surged in my heart. With the estate, not to mention the decorations outside, it's not a problem to add more decorations. She put down the grain bag, pinched a strawberry and put it in her mouth. The juice was full, sweet and sour, and delicious. The improved variety in later generations is good. They live on a large estate, with many fruits, plums, and peaches planted in the back, and a dedicated ingredient storage room. With these, she has been in the countryside for a long time without worrying about hunger. At first, I thought about the hamster moving house and tossed around for a few days. In the end, when I got on the train, I only brought a small gift box, but I walked out of the wealthy atmosphere. After bumping on the train for a few days, getting off the train and changing to a coach, getting off the coach and changing to a wooden boat, when I finally sat on the ox cart sent by Qingshan village, my initial thoughts had already been lost. She never knew in her 2 lifetimes that there was such a remote and backward place in Huagua. On both sides of the winding mountain path are unnamed shrubs, and the houses are all made of yellow mud, not even a single brick or tile can be seen. The driver of the ox cart is the village chief, wearing a coarse cloth shirt with patches stacked on top of it. She dare not imagine what kind of hardship Lu Chen has been living here. The ox cart entered the village, and Chu Nian lifted his suitcase on the side. Suddenly, he stared at a stumbling figure on the roadside and froze. It's Lu Chen. At the age of 18, Lu Chen experienced a huge transformation. He was skinny, limping when walking, and the youthful vigor of the proud son of heaven could no longer be seen between his eyebrows and eyes. Chu Nian put the pendant around her neck into her pocket and quickly called the village chief to stop. Oh no, the pendant passed down from my house is missing. The village chief was frightened when he heard this. The rural people were simple, and seeing Chu Nian dressed up, he knew that this pendant was very valuable. He quickly stopped the car to help find it. Chu Nian stopped the person and said, "Uncle village chief, the ox cart belongs to the team. It's not good to return it too late. You should bring your bow back first, and I'll ask this comrade to help me find it together." She walked up to Lu Chen and looked up at the man who was half her head higher with red eyes. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Entering the village. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. Entering the village. The village chief doesn't have much money in his hand, so he doesn't want to get involved with the necklace in Chu Nian's hand. He thought about the ox cart and felt that what Chu Nian had said was also right, but it happened to be the person in front of him. He is in trouble, and we urgently need to remind him here. Comrade, what kind of necklace does it look like? I'll go to the village and find a few comrades to look for, it's not troublesome. Lu Chen's composition is not good, and the prominent capitalists are the most excluded in the village. He is afraid that this petite student may get involved with him at first, and if he wants to leave Qingshan village again, it will be a troublesome matter. He couldn't speak directly, so he had to remind him, this comrade still has something to do, let's find someone else's help. At first thought, seeing Lu Chen, who was haunted by his dreams, there was no reason why he could obey. Lu Chen, the person she misses day and night, can finally return to her. This time, she will definitely not let Lu Chen suffer again. She wants to go back with the person in front of her and live the life they should have. At this moment, Lu Chen also stared blankly at the person in front of him. How good is the composition of the person he saved? How could we be in the same village as him? Qingshan village is well known far and wide, with the worst conditions. Most of the people who can reluctantly come here are people like him who have poor qualities or make mistakes. At first thought, how could it be? When he was lost in thought, the wound on his back began to ache, accompanied by an embarrassing cough. Comrade. The village chief was immediately anxious when he saw that he was lost in thought at first. He rushed over quickly, but couldn't hold on to his hand and recited, "Comrade, have you listened to me? It's getting dark soon, so it's not easy to delay." The village chief's urgent voice finally brought Chu Nian back to reality. She had to put on an ordinary face to avoid suspicion. Suppressing the surging emotions in his heart, Chu Nian smiled and spoke to the village chief, "Village chief, it's okay, it's just a necklace. There's no need for you laborers to be upset. I know this comrade in front of me and he's asking for his help. Take a look." She pointed to the sky as the sun was about to set and said, "It's getting dark soon. Go back quickly, otherwise if the cart is not delivered, you will have to deduct your work points." The human nature of Qingshan village is simple and honest, and it is also easy to deceive. The village chief couldn't help but say to Chu Nian that he had just reminded Wan to take Chu Nian's lightweight leather box back to the village. After he left, there were also the village loudspeakers that sounded immediately, all of which were voices from the 1970s. Comrades. At first, he waved proficiently from the past, but also restrained his emotions. At this moment, Lu Chen had not yet settled with her, and she didn't want to scare him. Lu Chen regained his senses and opened his mouth with a lonely and hoarse voice. "This female comrade, I don't know what your necklace looks like. Please tell me quickly so that I can help you find it," he said. "I'm really sorry, I have something else to do after I get off work." The eldest son of the Lu family received the best education since childhood, and even in such a desolate situation, he remained polite and courteous. At first thought, my nose couldn't help but ache. "Lu Chen, how much hardship have you endured in the years you haven't met me?" Tears that couldn't be controlled in her eyes finally burst out, even though her nails almost tore through the flesh in order to endure. Lu Chenben lowered his head to search, but his ear power was excellent. Even if Chu Nian was just a faint cry, he could still capture it. "Comrade, is this thing very important to you?" he said, carrying his hand back from his first thought, maintaining a good upbringing in his impression. "Only things that are completely important are shed tears due to accidental loss." Chu Nian was afraid that Lu Chen would worry, so she quickly wiped away her tears. She smiled slightly in front of her and said, "No, tears of joy. Seeing the person I want to see is better than anything." Lu Chen's body stiffened. There is only him here, and he has only met Chu Nian once. He couldn't understand what she said. Chu Nian saw his confusion and quickly explained, "Comrade, it's okay, help me find the necklace again. That thing is very important to me. Of course, it cannot be compared to the person in front of it." Lu Chen did not make any further inquiries. Xiao Suo's body looked down and investigated with utmost seriousness. The necklace was never lost from the beginning, but remained on Chu Nian's neck. She seized the opportunity and threw it to Lu Chen's side. Lu Chen quickly noticed and picked it up, asking, "Comrade, is this your necklace?" "That's right, this is my necklace." Chu Nian pretended to be surprised and went over to pick it up. She gratefully said, "I don't know what your name is, comrade. I really want to thank you well for this matter." Lu Chen was packing up the agricultural tools on the ground, with a very hasty back. He said, "I'm different from you, you don't need to know my name." The element of initial longing destined her to leave in just a few years, but it was him who, with his capitalist status, wanted to leave for a long time. "That's not possible." Chu Nian approached him without giving up. "Comrade, my name is Chu Nian. You helped me today, and I will thank you well from now on." A hint of confusion flashed before Lu Chen's eyes. He still didn't respond to Chu Nian this time, just picked up the things in his hand and said, "The village is right ahead, I'll take you there." His feet looked like they were injured, but he still walked quickly, as if he was deliberately escaping. "A faint pain felt in my first thought." She clenched the necklace tightly and followed Lu Chen's footsteps forward. Qingshan village is located at the corner, and the scenery at the village head is as simple and beautiful as the village name. On a broken and dilapidated wooden board, the 3 words, Qingshan village, were written crookedly, and the banner next to it became unclear due to years of decay. Even the road in front of the village. "It's very tattered, there's not a place to rest underneath." If it weren't for Chu Nian's shoes that she put on when she got off the train, just this mud would have completely rotted her hundreds of shoes. The people in front of the village saw Chu Nian come over and warmly welcomed him. They have long heard that this is the daughter of a big factory manager in the city, very knowledgeable. Comrade, has anything happened on this road? Have you found the necklace? Welcome comrades to our Qingshan village. If current students have the same level of consciousness as you, it would be amazing. The difficulty of becoming famous in Qingshan village, when it comes to the captain of the village's support team, those who voluntarily come over are just beginning to think about it. Chu Nian was surrounded by everyone, so he could only watch helplessly as Lu Chen left. She knew there would be opportunities in the future, so she didn't worry anymore. The body of Chu Nian stood upright and saluted everyone in front of him. Serve the people, the student Chu Nian, come and report. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Accounting. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. Accounting. The people in the village heard from the village chief before that the person who came was a petite city lady, who was still worried in her heart. After all, this delicate and tender person cannot do the job of double robbing. But at this moment, looking at the appearance of Chu Nian, it seemed appropriate, and he was just like them, an ordinary person. The captain of the detachment first realized, just like Chu Nian who came over to pick up the person after the military salute, comrade, there's no need to be so polite. The people in the village are very simple and don't have so much attention to detail. Yes. It is rare for a person with normal composition to come to the village, and everyone is happy. There is no reason to dislike them. And this girl doll, at first glance, is obedient and sensible. Chu Nian pursed her lips and smiled, thank you for your consideration. I haven't done any agricultural work before, and I don't have any foundation when it comes to speaking. As long as everyone doesn't dislike me, I can definitely learn to do well in the future. It's okay, the village chief walked over with his luggage. The task assigned to you by the organization this time is easy, so you don't have to worry about doing farm work. Before Chu Nian, she had never been to the countryside before. This time was rushed, and she only confirmed the location of Qingshan village. As for the tasks she came over, she didn't have much understanding. After handing over his luggage to Chu Nian, the village chief went to disperse the crowd. Don't look at me. Hurry up and get to work. I wonder if I need to get a share of work. Are you so lazy and worthy of the organization? The village chief's words fell, and the people present dispersed in a flurry. They were finally satisfied when they saw the appearance of their first thoughts. The one who stayed behind was the village captain, Li Qing, who was of military rank. Because the situation in Qingshan village was not good, he was specifically transferred here. As for whether he came voluntarily, it is unknown to everyone. He first took Chu Nian to the village branch in the village. It is said to be a village branch, but in fact, it is just a small and dilapidated courtyard renovated. The day before coming, it rained, and the moss in the courtyard had not been cleaned up yet. The eaves on the ground also leaked water, and the ticking sound was not abrupt in the quiet village. The two people who heard the sound walked over, one named Zhang Ming and the other named Hong Tao. They are both college students who were sent by the organization. As for the reason for their visit, Chu Nian probably guessed that it was similar to Li Qing's reason. Red Peach has a cheerful personality. After seeing Chu Nian, she greeted him and said, serve the people, Red Peach is the secretary here. Zhang Ming's expression was quite gloomy, naturally, in contrast to the Red Peach. He waved his hand perfunctorily and said, my name is Zhang Ming, and I am the correspondent here. In the future, all matters related to contacting the city will be entrusted to me. Li Qing helped introduce, the new comrade is called Chu Nian, who is the accountant here. Together, you will create Qingshan village. I have something else to attend to. Comrade Chu will hand it over to you, and the dormitory matters are also urgent over there. Don't worry. Red Peach quickly took control of the situation and the dormitory was empty. She was worried about no one to be with her. Zhang Ming only glanced at Chu Nian and then continued to do things. Every day I know I have to put on a face, and I don't know who owes you money. It's really boring, said Red Peach as she cut her head at his back. Did I add trouble to him? Chu Nian chuckled as she chatted. In the same place. If there is only one correspondent in the village, Zhang Ming should have a lot of work to do. Hong Tao couldn't stand his face, and Tong Chu red roast. It's not because he was reported at school. The place he came to was not good, so he thought about it. What's the matter? He doesn't have to rush and grab. He is happy compared with the villagers here. As Chu Nian listened, he thought to himself, indeed, this person from Qingming village, big or small, has been punished. By the way, you'll be in this office afterwards. Red Peach said as she pushed open a room for Chu Nian. The previous accountant was transferred back by his family. When he left, he was in a hurry and didn't explain anything. You just had to make do with reading those documents. If you don't understand, you can ask Captain Li about the accounts. In the end, he managed to get everything done. Chu Nian nodded lightly in response. Her gaze always looked towards the direction of the Red Peach without any management. What is the reason why this lively little girl came here? Red Peach felt the gaze of Chu Nian, as if she could see through this person's thoughts. Suddenly, she leaned in and said mysteriously, if I guess correctly, are you thinking in your heart now why I was demoted? It's true, Chu Nian could only generously admit that someone had exposed it. We will also be spending time together day and night in the future. If we get to know each other for a long time, there shouldn't be too much harm, right? Red Peach likes Chu Nian's unassuming appearance. She placed her hand on Chu Nian's shoulder and said nonchalantly, it's all because of my mouth, I'm talking nonsense, so I came over. Comrade, be careful when you talk to me later. The seriousness and tightness of the special era made Chu Nian almost gasp for breath along the way. However, the appearance of the Red Peach relieved her of her previous worries. It seems that in Qingshan village, one can live a good life without walking on thin ice. If that's the case, it would be much easier for her to help Lu Chen. The two of them immediately went to the dormitory, which was still a small room that had been renovated. From a distance, there was a strong smell of mold. On the matter of the house, Hong Tao lost her previous carefree attitude and said helplessly, after all, the village is poor, and there are only such dormitories. You can make do with living first. When the rain stops, let's move to another place. As for now, she pursed her lips, as long as it doesn't leak, it can make do. She saw that Chu Nian remained silent throughout the entire process, and her heart was still worried. After all, it was Miss Jiao who came from the city. Not only was it a small villa, but it should also be a building. With such a large gap now, this person probably couldn't bear it. Having been in Qingshan village for so long, she is not uncommon to see people rolling around due to dormitory reasons. Since Chu Nian had made a good decision to come to Qingshan village, she could bear everything here, but the living conditions were not good. Compared to seeing Lu Chen every day, what was all this worth? She shook her head indifferently and said, it's okay, I live wherever I want. I'm not picky about serving the people. She picked up her small suitcase and walked into the room. The environment inside is very spacious, and due to the proper cleaning by Hong Tao, it looks very tidy, not as bad as what she said. She opened the buckle of the suitcase and said leisurely, I think it's pretty good here. The Red Peach was instantly shocked, and what shocked her even more was the luggage she had just remembered. This small box only has a few close-fitting clothes inside, not even a blanket. This is really a decision made to go to the countryside. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Salute. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8 Salute. There were few things to be read at the beginning, so it was easy to put them away. She put down the ponytail on her head and tied up a fresh fried dough twists braid. However, in an instant, Miss Jiao's appearance was not there before, but she really looked like a knowledgeable youth going to the countryside. Red Peach sat beside her for a long time, applauding for Chu Nian, "Comrade, if I had your kind of ideological consciousness, I wouldn't have been relegated here. Looking back on these years, if it weren't for her family's help from behind, I wouldn't know what kind of life I would be living now." Chu Nian looked at herself in the mirror, feeling like she had passed away. She has truly returned to the past as she is now. Between combing my hair, Chu Nian pretended to ask casually, "Today when the village chief brought me over with a cart, I met a comrade who was very kind and helped me find the necklace I wanted. So I thought about it and wanted to bring something over to thank him." "I don't know, Miss Hongtao. Do you know him?" When Red Peach welcomed Chu Nian at the village entrance before, she saw someone in front of her. Just that one, the people in the village are also unwilling to come into contact with him. Unfortunately, it's a good skin bag. Red Peaches often think like this. She pretended to nod and then said, "The person you mentioned is named Lu Chen. Are you sure you want to go and give him a thank you gift? Everyone in the village is staring at you, so I think it's better not to go." Chu Nian doesn't care about these things. The reason why she asked Hongtao is to follow this principle. She has no reason to go to Lu Chen's residence. If someone sees her, she will definitely be gossiped about. But if there is witness from the village chief and the Red Peach, she is just going to give a thank you gift, so all of this makes sense. So I want to thank him even more. The first thought of a never-ending sentence made the heart unable to grasp it clearly. But in the end, she still gave Chu Nian the address, but the person carefully explained, "It's better not to be seen." Chu Nian said thank you and remembered the name of the Red Peach in her heart. Red Peaches are dazzling and dazzling. After a few years of going to the countryside, it will be completely over. With her personality, she can still make a name for herself even after going out. She searched for the address and walked on a muddy path, where someone knew her and greeted her with embarrassment and caution. "Are you the new accountant?" They are afraid that the people in this city will have a bad temper and look down on them. Chu Nian's face was gentle, and he quickly said, "Hello comrade, I will be in the village from now on. If there is anything, please call me anytime. As long as I have time, I will definitely come over." As everyone watched Chu Nian's generosity, their smiles bloomed and they became even more enthusiastic in their work. Chu Nian continued to nod and walk forward, following the muddy path, and soon arrived at a remote place. Here if we talk about it, the place where the Lu Chen family lives looks even more disheveled than the thatched cottage. It's also the rainy season now, and according to Chu Nian's estimation, if it rains heavily, the whole family won't be able to hide in time. A heavy frown on the first thought. Sigh. She sighed and took more things from the space. There were essential items such as flour and rice for daily life, and she didn't dare to take money, so she only took a few more clothes, as well as medical boxes and other items. Lu Chen was injured, and she still misses it to this day. When Chu Nian arrived at the door, coughing began to sound inside the room. The sound was rapid and weak, indicating that he had suffered a lot of torture. Then came the cries of the two girls. Chu Nian's gaze became increasingly heavy. She gritted her teeth and then knocked on the door, "Is there anyone inside?" When I heard the sound of my first thought, the sound inside came to a sudden halt, and then the door creaked open, revealing a 5-year-old little girl. Her eyes were still filled with innocence, looking only at the beautiful woman in front of her with a hint of amazement. But her voice was slurred, clearly with a crying tone, "Sister, have you taken the wrong path? Qingshan village is right ahead, not here." Although the people in the village are not likely to harm them, they don't usually come to them and don't come into contact with them. After meeting Lu Chen in Chunian, his second sister had already grown up. This child's name was Lu Yao, and he usually didn't like to talk and was very dull. But as she looked at the child's appearance, it was completely different from what had happened afterwards, and she could be separated without thinking. Then the door opened, and it was Lu Chen's eldest sister, named Lu Chen, who was very beautiful. Their family had very upright facial features. This person's eyes were already guarded by her own little sister. "What's up?" Li Lihua inside coughed again and said, "Come in quickly, let's not worry about things outside." Her intention was clearly to drive away Chu Nian Nian. Chu Nian Nian had not handed over the things in her hand yet, so there was no reason to leave. She quickly smiled and without saying a word, squeezed into the door frame. "You misunderstood. I came here today specifically to thank you. Your older brother helped me find something in front of me. I am also an intellectual who has just come to the countryside. My name is Chu Nian Nian, so just call me comrade in daily life. I'll give you all these things." Chu Nian Nian admitted to being anxious and didn't have time to explain more, so she wanted to give them something. That's because she saw the furnishings in the house. Two loose wooden frames and beds, with no cement on the ground, create a piece of yellow soil with misplaced footprints everywhere. And they have been carrying this kind of life for almost a year now. The three of them looked together and saw that flour, rice, and even blankets were the scarce items in the family. Despite this, Li Lihua was unable to calmly accept it. "Comrade, thank you for your kindness, but I cannot accept it." The two children listened, their eyes immediately closed. If that's the case, they probably will go hungry again. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Progress. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9 Progress. I couldn't understand why I didn't take away the things I had just thought of. But these can fill my stomach. With a blanket, I won't get cold. Do you want the two children to suffer? Lu Yao and Lu Chen had complex emotions on their small faces, with tearful eyes and a sense of grievance in their hearts. Who would have thought of such a day again? Although Li Lihua was seriously ill, she remained clear-headed and advised Chu Nian Nian, "Comrades, let's go. Our family earns wages through labor, and we already have enough to eat. As for other things, I dare not ask for them." "No way." Chu Nian Nian couldn't watch them continue like this. She said in a forced tone, "I'll leave my things here, you must take them." At the moment of the initial thought, the gate was subsequently hit by someone. Upon seeing such a familiar figure, Lu Chen quickly frowned. He put down his hoe, took off his patched coat, and came over to drag Chu Nian Nian away. He had a faint hint of anger. The comrade who had just gone to the countryside seemed to have some confusion about which was more important and which was less important. "How did you know I was here? I remember I didn't seem to have told you before." At first, Nian Nian looked at him dumbfounded and said, "I asked Hongtao, you look so beautiful. Isn't it easy to get to know you?" "What do you mean?" Lu Chen's sudden words caused some confusion in his heart. Chu Nian Nian took a step back and didn't say much about this matter. She bit her lower lip and said, "Comrade Lu, I didn't bring these things over because of your family's difficulties. I came to show my gratitude. That necklace is very important to me. If you don't accept this gift today, I won't be able to pass it." "But..." Chu Nian Nian quickly stopped Lu Chen from speaking. She playfully shrugged her shoulders and said, "If you don't tell me, no one will know. Just treat it as if it were all me this time." "Okay." Although Lu Chen didn't want to take it, he thought of his own mother and two younger sisters. Due to his incompetence, he couldn't even eat enough. Now that something was placed in front of him, he felt ashamed and had to take it. After careful consideration for a long time, he finally said a word of gratitude, "Thank you, comrade. But this is all for once today. Don't give me anything again from now on, it will be seen by others." The initial thought seemed to agree on the surface, but my heart also breathed a sigh of relief. "Just take it on. But Lu Chen's life-saving kindness to her is something she can never repay in her lifetime. As Lu Chen was about to turn his head, Chu Nian called out to him again, and a medicine box appeared in her hand at some point. Quickly handing it over, Chu Nian smiled brightly and said, "My name is Chu Nian, you must remember. I also know your name is Lu Chen, I definitely remember correctly." Not only due to reincarnation, but also due to the development of tear glands, the tears in the eyes of Chu Nian couldn't help flowing down. At this moment, Lu Chen had already turned around and held the medicine box, his previously faint ink eyes rippling along. He entered the room. Lu Yao and Lu Qing are swallowing saliva next to flour and rice. They usually eat either sweet potatoes or wild vegetables, which can fill their stomachs. They have not eaten these things for a long time. Li Lihua lay sideways on the bed, her head still buzzing with pain. With something else in her hand, Lu Chen frowned and asked, "Where did you meet that girl? Take these things and what if it doesn't affect you?" Lu Chen had already become silent. "Mom, I didn't do enough work today and didn't have enough work. If you had these things, you wouldn't have to go hungry during this time." At this point, Li Lihua was finally unable to refute. She fell silent and turned around somewhat uncomfortable. He looked at the medicine box and found the medicine that Li Lihua often took inside. He quickly searched and compared them one by one, and it was indeed correct. That person, Lu Chen pondered while holding the medicine, then quickly shook his head. It was impossible, it must not be what he thought. After Chu Nian returned, Zhang Ming came to find her. The person still looked lifeless and said, "Is that Comrade Chu? Your parents called and said they want to contact you. Come with me." Upon hearing these words, Chu Nian realized that she had not been safe with her parents since coming to the village for so long. She hurried to follow her, and the fried dough twists braids on both sides of her hair looked very light and lively. Zhang Ming originally had a calm face, but as he looked at this initial thought, his mind couldn't help but move. This person is even more good-looking than in a picture newspaper. While Zhang Ming was thinking about Fei Fei, Chu Nian had already strode over. She took the phone and sweetly said thank you. Zhang Ming's head exploded with a bang. After Chu Nian answered the phone, the voices of her first father and first mother were shouting across from her. The two of them were particularly worried and eagerly asked, "Nian, how are you doing there? I don't know about this in the past. Give us a call, it's causing your father and I to worry recklessly. That correspondent has a bad temper and wants to hang up after saying a few words. My first father was used to being a leader in the factory, but he hasn't gotten used to being looked down upon by others yet." The phone made a lot of noise, and Zhang Ming listened to everything outside. He felt a bit embarrassed and had to run away. Chu Nian didn't care much. She comforted the second old man, "It's not a big deal, and I'm not a child of a few years old. I can still bear this small thing. Isn't going to the countryside quite honorable?" The person across from her is completely helpless against her. My first father said, "Anyway, I have asked a few familiar brothers, and at most in a few years, you will be able to come back. When the time comes, I will find a relationship for you. With your education, finding a relaxed job is not a problem. It's just that you've been suffering for these past few years, what will you do then? I'll tell you what." My first mother quickly took my first father away, thinking about asking about her precious daughter's situation. "How is your place of residence? I heard it's raining over there. If the house leaks, how can your body and bones withstand it?" Chu Nian gave a dry laugh. Her parents really treat her like a porcelain doll. She shook her head and said, "It's okay, really not. Everyone is really good to me, and the people in the village still greet me." The two elders across from each other glanced at each other and couldn't help but shake their heads. This child was truly innocent. My first father didn't want to say anything more. He only told Chu Nian, "I asked a friend to help you with this accounting matter. You don't need to do the rough and tiring work, and don't rush to do it. It's in line with the organization's arrangements. Did you hear that? I know. At first thought, I knew that wherever there was any easy work, it was the two of them who helped behind. Zhang Ming looked at the time and reminded outside, "Comrade, it's time." At first, Nian Nian's family said goodbye reluctantly. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Early Work. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. Early Work. After Chu Nian left, Zhang Ming felt a bit embarrassed. He explained to Chu Nian, "The phone bill here is expensive, and the village cannot provide too much money, so it is necessary to set a time. Also, I apologize for my previous attitude towards your parents. He is too oppressive in this village, so he has an extremely negative attitude towards people and things." Chu Nian understood him and didn't blame him for it. She said, "I still have to thank you, otherwise I won't be able to communicate with my parents." "Comrade Zhang, your position is actually quite good, isn't it?" "Do you really think so?" Zhang Ming is the first time someone has said that his position as a correspondent is very good. After all, before this, everyone shook their heads one after another after hearing what he had done. Correspondent. What is it? It's just someone who answers the phone. I envy a person who has been reported for such an easy and brainless job. If the ingredients are not good, it can only be paired with this kind of thing. All of the above are sarcastic remarks from others towards him. Chu Nian understood in her heart how important a correspondent is to a village with closed information, so she admired Zhang Ming very much. Although ordinary things are delicate and complex, he still does it very well. "I'm serious," Chu Nian tilted her head and said, "Actually, you can also smile. Although we are working in the countryside now, who has a rule that we cannot laugh during hard work?" Laugh. Zhang Ming felt a bit dazed as he listened. He hadn't felt this way for a long time, so he curved his lips and said, "Thank you." Chu Nian shook her head and said, "It's okay." After Chu Nian left, Zhang Ming looked at her back and savored it for a long time. When Chinianian returned to the dormitory, Hong Tao was still sorting out the things in the village. While sorting out, she wrote, "There are so many pieces of things, and the captain also kindly handed them to me. It's really troublesome." Chu Nian quickly went over to help organize. "What's going on?" Hong Tao was not used to having people in the dormitory yet. She was almost startled, but when she saw that it was Chu Nian, she just patted her chest and said, "It scared me. I thought someone was here. That's all." The red peach kicked the seeds and agricultural tools under its feet and said, "After the grain rain, isn't it time to sow? We'll all score points and send them out. The captain doesn't know where he went, he's been very busy lately." "Well, everything's in my hands now. It's okay, I'll help you tomorrow." Red Peach waved her hand in joy, then in disappointment, "Forget it. You and the captain will go check the accounts tomorrow. You are the person arranged by the higher-ups, and I dare not let you suffer." Chu Nian pouted and said, "Don't treat me as special. I said I'm here to serve the people." Red Peach's expression froze at the corner of her mouth as she sighed, Okay. But be careful tomorrow. When we go over to distribute the seeds, we'll give them and then leave. Anyway, be careful with them, interact with the villagers, and don't talk to them too much." Chu Nian now roughly understands that the group of people mentioned by Hong Tao is probably defined as those with poor composition. If that's the case, Lu Chen must also be inside. Actually, they. Chu Nian said with a grain in his hand, pondering, "It's not much different from us either. You'll know by looking tomorrow." Red Peach knew that she might not be able to explain clearly for a while, so she only asked Chu Nian to rest first. The water used for bathing in Qingming village needs to be boiled. Fortunately, Hong Tao had already boiled the water, and she brought something for washing Chu Nian's face. "You little fool, if I hadn't prepared it for you in advance, you wouldn't even be able to take a shower today, she said. Thank you, Red Peach, Chu Nian said with a smile. Hong Tao pointed to Chu Nian and said, thank you. We will be sisters in the dormitory in the future, and our chief accountant, I will ask you for any money I have in the future. I can't please you. Chu Nian quickly straightened her face and said, bureaucratic capitalism doesn't work, Red Peach. When you talk, you must control your mouth. Okay, I remember this thing, said Red Peach with her hand covering her mouth, feeling extremely frustrated. The next morning, even the rooster did not wake up, and the sparse sound of the bed outside was already coming. Red Peach turned on the lights in the room and shook Chu Nian awake without stopping. Get up, we need to quickly meet up with the main army, she said. Chu Nian woke up so early for the first time, but she didn't react. She mechanically put on her clothes and aimlessly followed the hearts towards the main army. The captain was wearing a hat and his gaze was sharp as he stared ahead. He was talking about the situation in the team and said, you young people are becoming increasingly lazy. Don't think that if it rains these days, you can calm down. I'll tell you, today's planting plan was arranged by the higher-ups. The situation in Qingming village is special, and you just have to work hard without any problem. Not to mention that I treat you harshly every day. Is it difficult to sow and farm? You don't even earn enough work points one by one, you deserve to be hungry. I tell you all, you must do it for me today. Don't wait for me to lose my temper. When I first met the captain, his appearance was quite gentle. But at this moment, he was in front of everyone, inevitably showing a sense of intimidation. Hong Tao whispered to her, this kind of thing has nothing to do with us. If the captain wants to scold, let him scold. Let's do our own thing well. Chu Nian blinked and nodded in response. However, her gaze at this moment always unintentionally moved towards Lu Chen's direction. Lu Chen has lost a lot of weight, his tall figure and bones seem to only have contours, while the two trembling little dolls next to him seem to understand nothing. Their hands are so small that they can't even hold a sickle. The distant rooster's chirping had already begun, and the captain then issued an order, all right, distribute today's seeds to everyone. I don't need to say more about the special few people. Come forward and collect them yourself. Don't you know what you are? Ah. When the captain's words fell, everyone's eyes turned towards Lu Chen in unison. Among the people present, besides the Lu family, who else could have such an honor? The first one came out to collect the seeds, and Chu Nian became selfish and only gave a small bag. Red Peach looked anxious and quickly threw 2 more bags over. There were actually 2 female dolls, and she gave very little, even giving 2 pieces of maltose. At first, Nian's heart was full of frustration, but he only mechanically distributed seeds. As the crowd dispersed, Red Peach pulled Chu Nian aside and said, what are you doing? Did you disregard the rules in the company? His amount must be 3 times that of everyone else, it's a predetermined amount. End of this chapter.